And frankly, this is what I am saying. When you have a nation that is led by the law, you realize that you can't go wrong. Because there are so many things that can go wrong in a society when you have a society that is led by personal ambitions, a society that is led by individuals in terms of it's about what they want for you, what they think you deserve, and so on and so forth. So it is not so much about what you deserve. It is about what you need. When you look at it from that perspective, and then you realize that, well, when you have a nation that is led by law, it becomes apparent that there are some basic things that ought to be given to that citizen. For example, the ability to eat, to have a decent living, these should not be seen as luxuries, because those are given. You have to have the basic necessities fulfilled. So when you have a nation that is led by the law, you can't go wrong, because it is not about who you are, it's about what you are. It's about what you need. It's about what is necessary for you to survive. And since it is a nation that is led by law, it is not up to you or someone to make it happen. It is going to be automatic, because the law has predicted or has required some individual in charge of the state to provide those basic necessities to the citizenry. And today, this is exactly what Dessalines was talking about, because when you look at the Declaration of the Independence, you realize that we have strayed away far from what the intention was the day they declared this country an independent nation. Because the independence was not an attempt to be free in terms of being free and that's that. It was also an attempt to have a country that is led by law. It was also an attempt to have a country that is governed by law. And this is exactly the opposite that we're doing. For example, we are reduced to a point where one wonders, what would Dessalines say if he were alive today? It's that we're going the opposite direction, but yet we're claiming to represent his values. What we're doing is the opposite to what Dessalines was saying. Dessalines was telling you that these people are bad, and they are inherently bad. In other words, they didn't give us independence, we took it. They would have never given it to us, because to them, they didn't see nothing wrong in the actions that they were perpetrating on a daily basis on our souls. And that's what he's telling you. He's telling you that we became a nation because we fought for it. We fought for equality. We fought for being who we are. So it is not up to them. It is not up to any other nation to give us what we need. It is up to us to get it, because nobody's going to give it to us. So when you look at the atmosphere today, and you look at the environment in Haiti today, and you see foreigners, or you see presidents going to the United Nations, which is, by the way, a new global force in terms of it represents the same thing as the former forces represented back in the days of slavery, because the United Nations is like a center for those folks. and they just want to legitimize what they do. And once they're doing it through the United Nations, it becomes legal in the sense that they can come into your country, rape your wife, rape your children, and no one's going to say nothing about it because it was done by the United Nations. After all, can you judge them? Can you take them to court? Is there a mechanism in which you can call these people from the United Nations and take them to court and demand justice? I don't think so, because they're the powerful in the world, and then so many bad people have taken over this institution. Of course, the intention of the United Nations is different from what it is today. I don't think the intention in creating the United Nations is what it is today. I think today the United Nations have become a tool to fulfill the dreams or the will of people or power to be, and they want to control the world, and then this is the way they're going to do that. But at the same time, we have to look back as a nation to say to ourselves, well, why do we need the United Nations in Haiti? I mean, why do we need these people on this land? We don't need them, because if it was for them, we wouldn't be where we are today. And the only reason we are where we are today is because we fought for equality. We fought for freedom. But they're the ones that are putting a dent in this notion. In other words, they're the ones that are preventing us from becoming a free society, a free nation, because what they do is that they empower other individuals within our camps, and they empower these people, giving them the amount of power that they need to make sure that you are still oppressed. And the oppression is not so much a physical oppression, but it is an economical oppression. In other words, they're not going to allow you to thrive in the global economy if you don't do what they want you to do. Now, one needs to understand what are the complexities, or at least the implications of that. What is that? You are basically in slavery. You are the slave of the United Nations. And what does that mean is that, well, we need another 1804 in order to get these people out of Haiti, because they're never going to get out of Haiti by themselves. In other words, the people that are in Haiti today, be it the minister, whatever they are, whoever they are, they're not going to leave Haiti unless we kick them out. They're never going to leave Haiti because they're going to create, because that's what they're doing. They are creating an atmosphere in which their presence is required forever. And the thing they do is that while they are in this country, they facilitate their donors. They facilitate these people to take control over you. In other words, you work for them, and they get paid. And I think this is one of the best business in the world today, is being part of the United Nations, because you get to make money and you're not accounted for. You're not accounted to no one. So who are you accounted to when you are the Secretary General of the United Nations? Who are you accounted to? I wonder. So actions that you make or take, why do you take them? Because you have donors, and those donors oftentimes are politicians in other countries, and one of the purposes of their support to the United Nations is so that they can get control over some third world country in return. And this is exactly what they got. For example, in the case of Haiti, when you look at Haiti today, you don't have to be a rocket. You don't have to be a rocket science to understand that we are at the mercy of those foreign nations. They get to decide who will become, how we'll become, who we're going to become, and so on and so forth. So when one looks at that from that perspective, one realizes that things are never going to change, and that's the bottom line here. But just let's retrace a little bit about what Dessalines was talking about. Dessalines was telling you that you are today because we fought for that. You are today because we give our blood and we risk our lives so that you can be today. And the French people, what he was saying, that they're bad. They are inherently bad. And not only they're bad, they're always going to be bad because they're inherently bad. They'll never be our brothers. They'll never be similar to us. And I think in 1804, for a governor, a black person in power to say something like that, it was extremely powerful. It sent, I think, shivers down the spine of many in the business of slavery at the time. Because for somebody to say that one of the things that they do is that they conquered our spirit and they rendered us unable to be. And that was powerful. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, you realize that today in 2010, no foreign nation, namely white folks, none of them are going to want Haiti to move forward. Because a Haiti moving forward is a Haiti that would be legitimized. This 1804 would be legitimized and thereby recognizing their atrocities during that time. And I think this is the implied part of the all, because they don't want you to be. They won't let you be, because if you are, that means they are no longer going to be. Because you being a developed nation would be the emphasis of them being the bad guy. So they always want to make it look like it's not them, it's you. We gave you everything. We gave you all the support you needed, but yet you can't make it. It's not us. It's you. It plays out perfectly in the realm of what they want. So what does that tell you? Well, that tells you when you have a president that goes to the United Nations or that invites foreign nations on that soil, on the Haitian soil, it is a president that is out of touch. It is a president that doesn't know who we are. It is a president that doesn't understand how we came out to be, how we ended up being who we are. Because if you look at the history of Haiti, Haiti is a free country, not because we don't have any domination. It's not because we don't have any occupations on it. We're all a free nation because we get to do what we want to do. That's the whole concept of being free. And today, we are not. And today, we are solely dependent on foreign nations for everything we do. And simply because we want to leave a standard of living that is not compatible to who we are. Alright, if we're going to live like Americans, well, we're going to have to wait our turns. We can't live as Americans when we don't have the structure to live like Americans. We can't live like French when you don't have the structure to live like French. We cannot live like Canadians when we do not have the structures to live like Canadians. And what does that tell you? That tells you is that we're going to have a lot of folks that are going to be corrupted because their objective is to live like the white man. Now, it is not necessarily racism on my part when talking in that sense, because I don't consider myself conscious of racism. I do not see racism in the eyes of every white man that I encounter. In fact, it's the opposite. I think when you look at racism per se, it is also an inherent behavior or an inherent attitude in man that is, should I say, common everywhere. So you do not have to be white to express racist or racism or racist thoughts towards another brother. You don't have to be black. You don't have to have a specific ethnicity in order to have that view. Nonetheless, we have to acknowledge that the common vision in the past few hundred years is that the inferior class, the inferior race is the black man. And that same black man toppled this notion in 1804 when it was in its prime time, should I say. So in other words, what we did in 1804, we counter-argued against all those so-called philosophers, so-called what have you, who came with this notion that a black man was an inferior race, including founding fathers in the American independence. So we came right against these guys, and we told them, not directly, but our actions implied to them that we are not an inferior race because we are people like you. We can feel, think, and therefore we understand that what you're doing to us through slavery is inhumane, is unacceptable, and we're not going to stand for it. And this is what we did in 1804. In other words, when you look at the atmosphere, the climate of today, there's not much difference because those ideals have been inculcated, have been transmitted from generations to generations. So in other words, today you have people, be it black or white, that still look at the individual from a racial standpoint. And to that extent, or from that perspective, individuals with those kinds of view or that look at the world from that prism, they have a specific way of acting towards, the other individual that they so classified as inferior. And looking at it from that perspective, the only way to avoid those possibilities of being mistreated solely because of your race, of course, when we're talking about race, we're not talking about a specific group of individual, although socially we have constructed the human being to be different, saying, black, white, and what have you are different, but from a natural standpoint, we are human. We'll probably have some characteristics that are different of this physical characteristic, but from an inside perspective, we are one people, and therefore, in order to avoid being mistreated, it is good, it is better to be a nation that stands by itself, for itself, with itself. And when you look at Haiti today, the atmosphere, the climate is not permissible for something like that to happen. Now, one would argue or could argue that this is exactly what they wanted, and they basically led Haiti towards that path. Because when you look at the history of this country, since 1804 to this day, Haitians themselves have contributed to the demise of Haiti. Of course, the white men have tried to manipulate. The white men have tried to take control. But the white man has never been physically present in everything that happened in Haiti. In other words, it's always been another Haitian. It's always another black man that has somehow created the problems. And oftentimes, these white or these black folks are the products of the white man, and they still abide by who the white man want him or her to be. And I think these are the people that Dessalines foresaw in his Declaration of Independence. He foresaw these individuals. He foresaw them within our souls, within our camps. He foresaw individuals that wouldn't care that you cannot feed your children. He foresaw individuals that wouldn't care that you cannot sustain yourself, that you cannot eat, have basic needs filled out in terms of being able to afford a meal on a daily basis, having a blanket to cover yourself when it's cold, having a shelter to rest your soul or your body when it's raining, having the opportunity to be free, not the freedom of the body, but the freedom of the mind, freedom of the soul. In other words, you can be whoever you want to be. Nobody, nothing is restraining you from becoming the man you want to be. And these individuals that are within us, that are amongst us, they are making sure that we'll never become a free man. The Haitian remains dependent, a slave of a master. But the master today is not a master that is physically, that we can identify and overthrow the same way our ancestors did. So in other words, today, you have a country where the slavery that have permeated the society is a mental slavery. In other words, we want to be different. We want to have the opportunities our brothers don't have. And this is exactly the kind of mentality, the kind of brainwash that we have seen over in the past 2 centuries. And so over time, the fabric of being Haitian has eroded. And the erosion of that fabric is not by chance. And we ought to look back. We ought to stand back and say to ourselves, well, who we are. Where are we going? What can we do to fix the wrong, to undo the wrong that have been done to us? How can we go back and redo history? Well, one has to be realistic. Because, you see, today the climate is not the same. So what Dessalines could have done in 1804, nobody can do the same thing today, simply for the fact that there are certain aspects of our society that have been controlled. So in other words, you're always going to find somebody in Haiti who doesn't see things the way you do. Not because what you're saying is not right, because what I'm saying is that from a human standpoint, we don't have the same ideals. However, we understand the same concepts. And the fact that we understand the same concepts, yes, we may have a different way of getting there. We may have a different attitude towards how to get there. But the idea is that we're going into the same direction, which is the right direction. But in Haiti today, you are never going to find that kind of concept understanding in which people are aware that there is a need to move Haiti out of what it is, to move this country forward. Because not everybody in Haiti, not everyone in Haiti is suffering. And not everyone is suffering for a reason, because not everyone is under the spell of the white man. And not everyone is under the spell of the white man, because not everyone can be under the spell of the white man. In other words, there are Haitians that are doomed forever. There are people living in Haiti, scrolling through their veins, the blood of revolt, the blood of freedom, the blood of being a free man, and being a free man I will be. In other words, live free or die. So those people are still in Haiti. They are there. They have that desire to be free. And that freedom is not so much a physical freedom, but it is a mental, psychological freedom. And a situation in which it is virtually impossible for these people to make Haiti, simply for the fact that the white man has controls for those individuals. In other words, they have created a situation where only a few of these individuals are going to make an impact in Haiti. It's not that what they're saying is not right. It's not that what they want is something impossible. It's just the fact that since not everyone is in the same situation today, there's this concept, this notion that my life can be better if I keep my mouth shut. My life can be better if I don't say anything today. Okay, so I can probably get a job. I can probably get a visa if I'm not labeled in such a way that no one is going to want to be with me or be near me. And that notion has created a feeling of fear. A fear of being obliterated by the white man or by the system, a feeling of being chastised, and no one wants to be chastised. In other words, nobody wants to be seen as the agitator. Nobody wants to be seen as the one causing all the troubles in Haiti. In other words, you don't want to be labeled the bad guy. Now, bad guy per se doesn't necessarily mean that you are a bad guy. Because what Dessalines was doing in 1804, today Dessalines would be called a communist. Not a communist per se, but Dessalines would be equated to a terrorist. What Dessalines was doing in 1804, if Dessalines had done this today, Dessalines would be equated as a terrorist. Now, I'm not, listen, you have to understand this concept real well, because the concept of being a terrorist has nothing to do with what one actually does. It's the idea of terrorizing the people. And in doing so, you are equated as a terrorist. So in other words, the act of being a terrorist is not so much what the people did in 2001. So what they did in 2001, one could consider that the extreme of all things that they can do. Because what they did is that they killed other human beings. They killed people for their personal cause. In other words, what Dessalines was doing, or what Dessalines and so forth did in 1804, wouldn't be seen as a terrorist act if you were not looking at it from your perspective. If you were looking at it from a slave perspective, you would probably say that what he did was right, because he rebelled against the oppression and then so on and so forth. But on the other hand, if you're looking at it from the white man's perspective, Dessalines was terrorizing the white community at the time. Because remember, one of the things that Dessalines was saying, what the slave movement was saying, is that cut heads and burn houses. So this is a pretty stunning statement to say, cut heads and burn houses. That is to say, you're advocating for destruction. You're advocating for killings. Now that's what you're saying, what you're doing. So 1804 is not something that can be replicated today, simply for the fact that today it can be looked at the wrong way. But there's something we can do, or there's something that Haitian people can do. You can refuse to accept you can refuse to legitimize these people. You can refuse to legitimize what they do and how they want you to be. Because today, they're telling you who you are. They're telling you who you should be. And they're telling you who you're always going to be. Because they're setting up pathways for you to become. And that is their definition of who you should be. And I am sure that a lot of you, my Haitian brothers and sisters, you do not want to see Haiti the way they want Haiti to be. Because Haiti is not supposed to be something other than what Haitians want it to be. So don't tell me what you think I want. Don't tell me what you think I need. You don't have the opportunity. You don't have the power over me to tell me that. Again, we have to be realistic, because this is exactly what the white man wants. They have created a situation in which you cannot survive, you cannot exist, you cannot subsist if you don't do what they tell you to do. If you don't do what they want you to do. Because what they're telling you is simple. You have got to be what I want you to be. And I have a problem with that. So in other words, to go back to this notion of unity, it has become a vague term in terms of it is not possible anymore in Haiti. It is not possible in terms of, it is not possible to go and find people like Dessalines, find people like Toussaint, find people like so many of the fighters that contributed to the independence. And then we have to mention that these people were different in terms of their ideals, their ideologies. There were a lot of differences in their ways of thinking. Nonetheless, that didn't stop them from being part of Haiti in terms of creating a country that would be good for every single Haitian. So in other words, it is not going to be possible today in 2010 to find people like Christopher or Pétion or Clervaux, or people like Jaffard or Vernet or Gabart, people like Roman or Guerin, Capois, Joe, Jean-Louis Francois, and Peru Kenzie, Bagley, McGraw, Ambroise, Irons, Brave, Yayu, people like Bonnet, Popolier, Borelli, Chevalier, Marion, Magny, Brooks, Chavarron. You're not going to find people like Macajus, Dupuy, Cabone, Amy, Raphael, all of these officers that participated, that came to the point where they said to themselves, well, we've got to have a different Haiti, and in order to have a different Haiti, we've got to direct ourselves into the right way. And I think it is imperative that we Haitians would understand today, what does that mean? What the context of our society means today. In Haiti, we have so many different groups of individuals, subgroups of individuals, and even those subgroups, you have other groups and other subgroups and so on and so forth. You're never going to find somebody who's going to say, well, let's do something for Haiti as a whole, not so much for myself. Because I can have a living, and it is possible for me to have a living if I work hard and if I apply myself, I can find a way out. But what about those who cannot? What about those who just don't have the opportunity to be? For example, people that are basically living in quarantine, and they're living in quarantine because they're living so far out that they don't even know what is going on in their country. In fact, these people are living to subsist, and they live on some menial rations of food a day, and they work hard, but yet they don't get the reward of their hard working. So, when you look at all that, and you look at all these people, all these things, you've come to the conclusion that what needs to be done in Haiti, it is never going to be done, simply for the fact that the different factions that the system has created have made it impossible. Now, we can only look at our history. We can only look at what we could have been, we should have been, and look at it with despair and sadness, and say to ourselves that we could have been the greatest nation on earth, at least the greatest black nation on earth. We could have owned the world. We could have been so far away in terms of progress, equality, liberty, freedom, that we could have been an exemplar, a model for every other nations to follow. And unfortunately, the white man, they prevailed. And the fact that they prevailed has created a situation where we have basically became the slaves and we are the slaves of our own self. In other words, we are enchained not because there's a physical chain in our ankles. It's because we are enchained in our mind, and we don't want to be seen as the agitator. And within that perspective, we're fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for a loaf of bread, and we ignore the fact that this country would have never been who we are had our founding fathers fought for the piece of bread. And it was something that man have to consider. Today, Haitians today have to consider. Yes, the life is probably good. You probably have a good living either inside Haiti or outside of Haiti. But at the same time, the lives of so many are probably miserable, bad, either those living inside or outside of Haiti. And as a nation, who we are is incumbent upon who we want to be. And it is apparent that today we don't want to be anything but someone else's will. It is apparent that today we don't want to be something other than what they want us to be, because we have grown accustomed to this notion that they know best. We've grown accustomed to this notion that they can do better. We have grown accustomed to this notion that we are never going to be. We've grown accustomed to this notion that we can only be last. And that concept, that apprehension have, for better or for worse, made Haiti what it is today, a desolate land where there are no men. In other words, Haiti is only a land without any man to stand for what a man should stand for: liberty, freedom, and equality.